All right, we're going to look at exercises 7-9 and 7-10, and this is dealing with the issue of whether we should eliminate an operating segment or keep it open. So the question stem states, Nicolette Corporation operates in a decentralized format. Each segment prepares financials showing segment profits and losses incurred each fiscal period. One division has been a constant loss leader for the company. Their latest results are as follows. So they had sales of 1.2 million, variable costs of $1,050,000, and fixed costs of $350,000. Management have contemplated with the idea of closing this segment of the business. In 7-9, the question is, what is the least amount of fixed costs they would have to avoid in order to make it financially worth it to close this segment? And then in 7-10 asks, assuming none of the fixed costs are avoidable, what is the effect on overall firm profits if this division is eliminated, if profits go down, enter amount as a negative? So first thing I want to focus on is just what are the segment results as of now? So nothing has changed. This is the current operational results for this segment. So sales of 1.2 million, variable costs of $1,050,000, fixed costs of $350,000. They're operating at an operating loss of $200,000. So you might think, okay, if we eliminate this segment, profits are going to go up by $200,000 because we're getting rid of this loss. But remember, that's not what to focus on. What to focus on is the amount of contribution margin you would be giving up relative to the fixed cost you would save by eliminating a segment. So exercise 7-9, again, remember, what are they asking? They're asking, what is the least amount of fixed costs they would have to avoid in order to make it financially worth it to close this segment? So remember, when making these decisions, that's, excuse me, save fixed costs must be equal or greater than the lost contribution margin that we would be giving up. What is our contribution margin in this example? Remember, contribution margin is the difference between sales and variable costs. So contribution margin is 150,000. If we were to close this division, we are giving up contribution margin of $150,000. That contribution margin could have been used to cover fixed costs going forward. But if we close this segment, we're giving that up. So what does that mean? That means we better save at least that much or more of fixed costs to make it worth our financial worthwhile. Let me show you an example here. Let's say sales remain the same, or sorry, sales are zero. So we're assuming we're cutting out this division, we're closing it. If we were to do so, sales would go to zero because the division is closed. We weren't selling anything. Variable costs would also close because we're not incurring anything. We're not making anything, so we're not incurring any variable costs. Fixed costs, some might remain. And remember, to make this worth our while, you have to save at least $150,000 in fixed costs. So let's say we save $150,000. So fixed costs would drop from $350,000 to $200,000. I'm gonna make this look a little better. My apologies on formatting. So at this case, what is our operating income or loss for this division if we were to close it? Well, remember, it's sales minus variable costs minus fixed costs. If we were to save $150,000 in fixed costs or avoid $150,000 in fixed costs, then we are no better or worse off financially. Now, what happens if we save more than the contribution margin that we gave up? We gave up $150,000 in contribution margin. Let's say we save $200,000 in fixed costs. So fixed costs drop from $350,000. Now we save $200,000 of it, or we avoid it. Now fixed costs are $150,000. Well, look at that. We're actually better off financially if we were to close this segment in this scenario where we dropped fixed costs from 350 to 150. And the reason being is because we saved more fixed costs than what we gave up in contribution margin. In essence, what you're doing here is I'm paying $150,000 in contribution margin, and I'm getting back 200,000 in fixed costs. Anyone would do that deal every day and twice on Sunday. If we were to save less than 150,000 in fixed costs, so let's say by closing this segment, we're giving up contribution margin of 150,000. Let's say we only save 75,000 in fixed costs. We'll now look at operational results. We are much worse off if we were to close this segment, because now instead of operating at a loss of 200,000, we're at a loss of 275, because this 275,000 in fixed costs isn't going anywhere. We can't avoid it. And we just gave up 150,000 in contribution margin to only save 75,000 in fixed costs. So we are worse off financially by $75,000. And you can see that as the difference in the amount of loss generated here. It always goes back to this statement here. Please, please, please remember this. When you're making this decision, whether to eliminate a segment or to keep it open, compare the contribution margin you're giving up to the fixed costs that you're saving. Now, exercise 710 asks, assuming none of the fixed costs are avoidable, what would the operating income or loss be for this segment? Well, we close this segment. Sales are zero, makes sense. Variable costs are zero. Contribution margin is zero. And if none of the fixed costs are avoidable, that means we incur all 350,000 in fixed costs. That means instead of operating at a loss of 200,000, if we kept it open, we're now operating at a loss of 350,000. So we are worse off by doing so. Because of that, we should not eliminate this division. And remember, why are we worse off? We gave up contribution margin of 150,000. That, remember, what does contribution margin do? It covers fixed costs. We gave up all 150,000 of contribution margin and saved nothing. We got nothing back for it. So we are $150,000 worth off, which is that lost contribution margin. Again, it goes back to this statement here. Compare the fixed cost you would save by closing a division versus the contribution margin you're giving up. If the savings is greater than the contribution margin you're giving up, then from a financial standpoint, it makes sense to close the division. Otherwise, keep it open and your losses will not be hurt as much.